soulmates. Thank you so much for joining us on this Giving Tuesday, November 29th. We will talk more about that in just a bit. Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. I'm Courtney Hicks.
And I'm Nicordelai Corte. We're honored to stand behind this desk each day to take you on a journey across Black America and the stories that impact our people.
You are so right. We bring you our news, our views, and our voice. So topping our news today, we begin with shocking new reports that WNBA star Brittney Griner is facing homophobia, racism, and a 16-hour workday at the Russian penal colony she was transferred to. Reports say that the Biden administration is still working on a deal to free Griner, but says Russia is not responding to its proposals. Griner was sentenced to 9 years in prison after being convicted on drug charges for having cannabis oil in her luggage.
Now from Russia to Connecticut, where 5 Connecticut police officers have been charged after a man was left paralyzed while in their custody. Randy Cox was headed to a New Haven police station for processing back in June when the driver of the van braked hard to avoid a crash. Cox flew head first into the wall of the van. Now, officers dragged him from the van and placed him in a holding cell until he was taken to the hospital. Cox could be heard telling officers that he can't move. However, instead of offering assistance, the officers just mocked him and accused him of faking his injuries.
You know, this kind of reminds me of the story that has been across social media down in Georgia, Camden County, I do believe it is, concerning Jared Hobbs, who seemed to be pretty peaceful in his cell, according to what we saw on that video that went viral. Now those 3 officers have been, of course, arrested and now charged, and another officer involved will face disciplinary action. So it sounds like there is now a pattern of these officers being brought to justice or held responsible when there has been a violation, an obvious violation.
Yeah, and it also reminds me of the Freddie Gray case. Remember Freddie Gray back in Baltimore, who was in police custody. He was in the back of essentially a paddy wagon, and he came out of that paddy wagon unlike how he went into that paddy wagon. And he had severe injuries. I believe he had a broken neck, if I remember correctly. And so, you know, we've got to keep our eye on what's happening to folks under police custody. You know, everybody has, you know, the right to due process, and whenever law enforcement turns into judge, jury, and executioner, that's not a sign of progress, that's regress.
Right. And speaking of those who have been charged, the 19-year-old man behind the mass shooting at a Buffalo supermarket last May pleads guilty to murder and hate-motivated terrorism charges. Prosecutors say the defendant targeted the victims because they were Black. Here is the very latest.
The teenager, police say, fatally shot 10 Black people at a top supermarket in Buffalo, New York, pled guilty to murder and hate-motivated terrorism charges on Monday. Prosecutors say 19-year-old Peyton Gendron targeted victims in that May shooting because of their skin color. Erie County District Attorney John Flynn calling the guilty plea swift justice.
Justice has been done today. But while justice has been accomplished, nothing will ever bring back the 10 beautiful people who lost their lives on that day.
The victims ranged in age from 32 to 86 years old. Among them, store customers, a top security guard, and a church deacon. In court on Monday, community leaders and victims' family members cried as the judge referred to each victim by name.
It was just gut-wrenching, and it made you angry all over again.
That was a hard pill to swallow because it just brings back that day all over again.
Prosecutors say the evidence against Gendron was overwhelming. It included video footage from a helmet camera that he live streamed from during the attack, as well as an online document where he posted his views about white supremacy. Gendron will be sentenced on February 15th. The domestic terror charge automatically carries life in prison without parole.
This critical step represents a condemnation of the racist ideology that fueled his horrific actions on May 14th.
Now, he will also go on to face separate federal hate crime charges that could carry the death penalty. And it's good, Nicordelai, to see again the beginnings of what we hope will be justice for those families. I can't imagine as they continue to heal and mourn and grieve that now we have to, face, or they have to face the justice process, which can be a little long and drawn out. And make no mistake, this is a little caveat to the story here. Now, originally this young man pled not guilty, but I guess his folks got to him and they changed their strategy. He then pleaded not guilty, and not only not guilty, but also gave up his right to an appeal. So, that just speaks on just his vigilance to stay hateful. The fact that he went about pleading guilty that first go around, and someone in his camp must have convinced him otherwise, which is I'm happy to hear, because it somewhat, if you will, spares a little bit of the emotion of those families in that community. Could you imagine if he pleaded not guilty, how that would just continue to stir up just the hurt?
Yeah, but it's still, in my view, has that effect, because it feels empty. It feels empty. I mean, it was a senseless act of violence. That
there's no remorse.
And there's no remorse.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I did it. That's what it feels like, right? And I can only imagine what these families are feeling like, especially during the holiday season. This is their first holiday season without their loved ones, and to have had that experience in the courtroom with their killer. Just continued prayers for healing for all the folks in Buffalo that are just beginning on the healing path.
It's heavy, and it will always be heavy.
Yeah. From Buffalo to Houston, Texas. Now, we have an update to a story that we first brought to you yesterday. The city of Houston has lifted a boil water order. The order first went into effect on Sunday, forcing the city's 2 million residents to boil their tap water before drinking or bathing with it. Now, schools and businesses were shut down yesterday and today. The issue was blamed on a power outage at a water purification plant.
And a new study just released found that 75% of Americans say they have come across posts on their feeds that calls for or encourages violence. Now, the survey says the acts of violence are based on one's race, gender, or sexual orientation. Now, this study was done with over 1,000 social media users. That's including women, people of color, and members of the LGBTQ community. Data also revealed women and LGBTQ people report higher rates of online harassment compared to other groups.
Now off to St. Louis, where the St. Louis mayor, Tashora Jones, is leaving Twitter following recent remarks from Elon Musk regarding protests and movements surrounding Mike Brown's murder. Mayor Jones says that on Thanksgiving, she saw a tweet from Musk mocking, quotes, the Stay Woke apparel that was inside of Twitter's headquarters, followed with a caption that read in part, "Hands up, don't shoot," was made up in fiction. Jones says she's tired of the racist messages that has flooded the social platform since Musk's takeover. The tweet from Elon has since been deleted.
I don't know. There's a lot going on with Twitter. And a lot of people are asking, how are we watching something implode, or will, Elon Musk turn the corner and still make this a very safe place for people to come and voice their opinions and talk about issues. I don't know. I still think it's left to be seen. I know, a lot of celebrities have already pulled up from Twitter. I'm still on. I'm not so sure. I'm not really a Twitter person. I'll go and tap in and see what's happening. But as far as actually, tweets and things like that, not so much. So it'll just be interesting to see. I think it all starts at the top, and that's where all the mayhem is coming from, ask me.
And I think part of what we're seeing is Elon Musk turning Twitter into his playground. I mean, let's not forget, Elon Musk grew up in South Africa, apartheid South Africa. His family has, deep roots there. And so, his lack of sensitivity, his lack of awareness, or what he tries to act like is a lack of awareness, there's too much history that precedes him for him to be so callous and so careless in how he's governing himself. and the kind of platform that he's trying to create for us all to be a part of. And so, you know, a lot of people voting with their feet and their fingers.
Yeah, it comes off as a bit reckless. All right, now to South Carolina, where there is a trial underway to decide if the state's congressional maps are legal following what lawyers are calling a dilution of black voting power by the legislature. Now, the claim says the move was made by remaking the boundaries of the only House district seat that Democrats have taken control of in over 30 years. Now, according to the NAACP, the new boundaries drawn are unconstitutional, and they split black voters in the state's 1st, 2nd, and 5th district and packed them all into the 6th, which already had the majority of African American voters.
So from boundaries being drawn to boundaries being broken, our first black U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, is calling on Congress to pass a new spending bill for the Pentagon. He says that if it doesn't happen, it could result in significant harm to our national security. Initially, Congress proposed a temporary funding measure to give negotiators more time to agree on a new spending bill. However, Austin says operating under a temporary funding resolution, it moves our budget backward, not forward, and will reduce the Pentagon's top line by $3 billion. Congress has until December 16th to pass a new funding bill and avoid a federal government shutdown.
Okay, let's check in with the VP, as this week Kamala Harris is expected to meet with the president of France in hopes to strengthen the working relationship with NASA. Now, the meetings are scheduled for tomorrow and Thursday. For a series of talks on subjects like Iran's nuclear program and Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. Another main focus will also be on Russia's war in the Ukraine.
Sad news on this Giving Tuesday. Congressman Donald McEachin of Virginia is dead after a long battle with colorectal cancer. McEachin represented Virginia's 4th congressional district near Richmond. His chief of staff says his office will continue to serve constituents until a new representative is elected. McEachin was 61 years old.
All right, sorry to hear that. Let's go to Kentucky, where their attorney general is in hot water following a recent press conference on abortion. Daniel Cameron recently addressed residents regarding the state's near total abortion ban, saying that he promotes Kentucky values without fear or favor, those are his words, but would not respond to questions about supporting more exceptions on the ban. Now, Kentucky was one of several states that voted to ban abortion rights. You may remember Mr. Daniel Cameron as the Attorney General who decided back in 2020 not to charge officers in the murder of Breonna Taylor.
A black neighborhood from the early 20th century is being rediscovered in Florida City, thanks to the work of community activists. Clearwater Heights, Florida was a thriving black neighborhood, but being in the segregated South, African Americans could stay at the white facilities, walk on the beach, or swim in the bay. And when they did, they were laid to rest in segregated graveyards, which were later paved over. Well, this week, they found 328 likely graves, many under a parking lot in the area. It's reported that there's 550 graves on record in total. The group says that they won't stop until each and every grave is found.
You know, Nicolai, in my childhood home and now the home with my husband, 60 Minutes is a must. And they just did a big, huge report on this this past Sunday. And, you know, listen, we unfortunately hear these stories all the time where they have paved over these graves of our loved ones, of our ancestors. But what really got me is that there was a particular grave that was designated for white residents, you know, of that day. And they clearly voted to go around, they paved around that little section of town where that cemetery sat versus this in secrecy, really, because they really misled those folks. And they paved over those graves of those ancestors, schools, an arena, office buildings. It was just, I'm gonna use the word disgusting. Yeah. And just really heartbreaking. And they're really trying to see about how they're gonna go about reckoning the situation. One resident, older black elder, said, tear them all down. And I understand his frustration and his hurt. But it's going to be tough to try to figure out what to do with that.
I mean, not so long ago, I took a road trip with my DC best friend, Jason. We went up to New England, and we drove through New Hampshire, where there was a parking lot where they discovered that these were unmarked graves of enslaved people.
Yes.
Right? And they did, a lot of what folks are doing in Florida City, which was create, some memorial to recognize and affirm the lives that were lost and also the lives that were literally paved over. And so hopefully this is a part of a larger movement that's growing across the country to right these wrongs.
Yeah, I don't know if you can right that wrong. You can do your best to say I'm sorry, but I don't know about that. Yeah. All right, up next, monkeypox gets rebranded.
Yep, that's right. Learn why the medical term is being updated and more Fox Soul's Black Report after the break.